The Beaver Wars, also known as the Iroquois Wars of the French and Iroquois Wars, encompass a series of conflicts fought in the mid-17th century in eastern North America. During the 17th century, the Beaver Wars was a battle for economic welfare throughout the St. Lawrence and the lower Great Lakes region. The war was between the Iroquois trying to take control of the fur trade from the Hurons, the northern Algonquians, and the French allies. From medieval times, Europeans had obtained furs from Russia and Scandinavia. American pelts began coming on the market during the 16th century, decades before the French, English, and Dutch established permanent settlements and trading posts on the continent. After Basque fishermen chasing cod off Newfoundland's Grand Banks bartered with local Indians for beaver robes to help fend off the numbing Atlantic chill. By virtue of the location, military might, and diplomatic skill, these tribes wielded tremendous influence in European-Indian relations from the early 17th century through the late 18th century. The Iroquois sought to expand the territory and monopolize the fur trade and the trade between European markets and the tribes of the Western Great Lakes region. Ever since the late 18th and first half of the 19th century, there were 6 different nations: Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Tuscarora, and Seneca. Each of these Native American nations has beliefs in tribal sovereignty and a collective body called the League. The 6 nations had a supra-level affirmation in the sovereignty of the 2 leagues between Onondaga and New York. Government officials in Washington, D.C. and Ottawa recognized the Iroquois sovereignty only in existence of individual tribal governments. The Iroquois Confederation, led by the dominant Mohawk, mobilized against the largely Algonquin-speaking tribes of the Great Lakes region. The Iroquois were armed by their Dutch and English trading partners. The Algonquin were backed by the French, the chief trading partner. The wars were brutal and are considered one of the bloodiest series of conflicts in the history of North America, as the Iroquois destroyed several large tribal confederacies, including the Huron, Neutral Erie, Susquehannock, and Shawnee. They became dominant in the region and enlarged the territory, realigning the tribal geography of North America. They pushed some eastern tribes to the west of the Mississippi River, or southward into the Carolinas. The Iroquois gained control of the Ohio Valley lands as hunting ground. From about 1670 onward, the Ohio Country and the lower peninsula of Michigan had become virtually empty of native people as refugees fled westward to escape the Iroquois warriors. Both Algonquin and Iroquois societies were greatly disrupted by these wars. The conflict subsided with the loss by the Iroquois of their Dutch allies in the New Netherland colony after England took it over, and with French objective of gaining the Iroquois as an ally against English encroachment. After the Iroquois became trading partners with the English, their alliance was a crucial component of the later English expansion. The English used the Iroquois conquests as a claim to the Old Northwest Territory. Origins. The expeditions of French explorers Jacques Cartier in the 1540s made the first written records of the Native Americans in North America. French explorers and fishermen had traded in the region near the mouth of the St. Lawrence River estuary a decade before then for valuable furs. Cartier wrote of encounters with a people later classified as the St. Lawrence Iroquois, also known as the Stadacona, a Laurentian people who occupied several fortified villages, including Stadacona and Hochelaga. Cartier recorded an ongoing war between the Stadaconans and another tribe known as the Tudaman, who had destroyed one of the forts the previous year, resulting in 200 deaths. Wars and politics in Europe distracted French efforts at colonization in the St. Lawrence Valley until the beginning of the 17th century, when they founded Quebec in 1608. When the French returned to the area, they found the sites of both Stadacona and Hochelaga abandoned, completely destroyed by an unknown enemy. Based on analysis of political and economic conditions at the time, some anthropologists and historians have suggested that the Mohawk nation of the Iroquois Confederacy destroyed and drove out the St. Lawrence Iroquoians. When the French returned, they found no inhabitants in this part of the upper river valley. The Iroquois and the Iroquoian-speaking Huron used it as hunting ground. The causes remain unclear. This was perhaps in response to the formation of the League of the Iroquois. When the French returned in 1601, the St. Lawrence Valley had already been the site of generations of blood feud-style warfare, as characterized the relations of the Iroquois with virtually all neighboring peoples. When Samuel de Champlain landed at Dorsac near the St. Lawrence, the Montagnais, Algonquin, and Huron almost immediately recruited him and his small company of French adventurers to assist in attacking their Iroquois enemies upriver. Before 1603, Champlain had formed an offensive alliance against the Iroquois. He decided that the French would not trade firearms to the Iroquois. He had a commercial rationale. The northern natives provided the French with valuable furs, and the Iroquois, based in present-day New York, interfered with that trade. The first deliberate battle with the Iroquois in 1609 was fought at Champlain's initiative. Narrative makes it plain Champlain deliberately went along with the war party down Lake Champlain, and further, this battle created 150 years of mistrust that poisoned any chances that French-Iroquois alliances would be durable and long-lived. Champlain wrote, "I had come with no other intention than to make war." In the company of his Huron and Algonquin allies, Champlain and his forces fought a pitched battle with the Mohawk on the shores of Lake Champlain. Champlain single-handedly killed 3 chiefs with an arquebus, despite the war chiefs having worn arrow-proof body armor made of plaited sticks. In 1610, Champlain and his armed French companions helped the Algonquin and the Huron defeat a large Iroquois raiding party. In 1615, Champlain joined a Huron raiding party and took part in a siege on an Iroquois town, probably among the Onondaga south of Lake Ontario. The attack ultimately failed, and Champlain was injured. After Hudson's discovery for the Dutch East India Company in 1609, a year-round trading post was placed near Albany. At Fort Nassau, the Dutch were surrounded by 1,600 warriors and families of the Mohican tribe. The Dutch offered to buy the land off of the Mohicans but allowed traders to live among them as valued guests, and in 1618 they had an agreement with the traders around. In the earlier 17th century, the great potential was yet to be discovered west towards the Great Lakes. 1617 Fort Nassau was abandoned due to flooding, and in 1624 Fort Orange was built. Fort Orange renewed efforts to exploit traffic along the Mohicans Channel, and thus started war with the Mohawks. 1626 The Dutch and the Mohicans were ambushed by Mohawks who were only armed with bows and arrows. The Dutch withdrew from the treaty with the Mohicans and made a truce with the Mohawks. The Mohawks wanted to avoid further conflict with Fort Orange. They wanted to prosper rather than destroy it. By 1628 the Mohawks defeated the Mohicans, who eventually fled to the Connecticut Valley. The Mohawks did not intend to defeat the Mohicans to open free trade. They wanted to destroy the Mohicans' control to destroy Dutch trade. Dutch competition. In 1610 to 1614, the Dutch established a series of seasonal trading posts on the Hudson and Delaware rivers, including one on Castle Island at the eastern edge of Mohawk territory near present-day Albany. This gave the Iroquois direct access to European markets. The Dutch trading efforts and eventual colonies in New Jersey and Delaware soon also established trade with the coastal Delaware nation and more southerly Susquehannock. The Dutch were reluctant to trade firearms to the Delaware. The founding in 1614 of Fort Nassau and its 1624 replacement by Fort Orange removed the Iroquois' need to rely on the French and their allied tribes to have to travel through southern tribal territories to reach European traders. The Dutch supplied the Mohawk and other Iroquois with guns. In addition, the new post offered valuable tools that the Iroquois could receive in exchange for animal pelts. They began large-scale hunting for furs to satisfy demand among the peoples for new products. At this time, conflict began to grow quickly between the Iroquois and the American Indian peoples supported by the French. The Iroquois inhabited the region of present-day New York south of Lake Ontario and west of the Hudson River. The Iroquois lands comprised a large ethnic island, surrounded on all sides but the south by Algonquin-speaking nations. All traditional enemies, including the Shawnee to the west in the Ohio Country. The rivals also included the Iroquoian-speaking neutral nation and Huron confederacies, who lived on the western shore of Lake Ontario and southern shore of Lake Huron to the west, respectively, and the Susquehannock to the south. While part of the Iroquoian-speaking language family, these tribes historically were competitive with and sometimes enemies of the Iroquois, who at the time had 5 nations in their confederacy. Beaver Wars begin. In 1628 the Mohawk defeated the Mohican, pushing them east of the Hudson River and establishing a monopoly of trade with the Dutch at Fort Orange, New Netherland. In the same era, the Susquehannock, also well armed by Dutch traders, effectively reduced the strength of the Delaware and won a protracted declared war with the English-dominated province of Maryland. By the 1630s, the Iroquois had become fully armed with European weaponry through the trade with the Dutch. The Iroquois, particularly the Mohawk, had come to rely on the trade for firearms and other highly valued and much coveted European goods for their livelihood and survival. They used the growing expertise with the arquebus to good effect in their continuing wars with the Algonquin, Huron, and other traditional enemies. The French, meanwhile, outlawed the trading of firearms to the native allies, though they occasionally gave arquebuses as gifts to individuals who converted to Christianity. Although the Iroquois first attacked their traditional enemies, the alliance of these tribes with the French quickly brought the Iroquois into fierce and bloody conflict directly with the colonists. The expansion of hunting for the fur trade with Europe accelerated the decline of the beaver population in the region. By 1640 the animal had largely disappeared from the Hudson Valley. Historian editors of American Heritage magazine have noted that the growing scarcity of the beaver in the lands controlled by the Iroquois in the middle 17th century accelerated the wars. The center of the fur trade shifted northward to the colder regions of present-day southern Ontario, an area controlled by the neutral as well as by the Huron peoples, who were close trading partners of the French. The Iroquois, displaced in that region by other nations and threatened by the high losses to smallpox and other infectious disease, began an aggressive campaign to expand their area of control.